right, so everybody welcome, right, to this edition of the Master Implementers interview series, right? So today we have a very exciting guest, right, that I want to get for quite a while, right? I've been following him since I think 8 years ago, right? Mr. Stuart Tan, right, who I think is the biggest, largest NLP trainer in not just Singapore but Asia, right? So excited to have you. So Stuart, right, before we begin, right, it's okay if we just take 1 or 2 minutes to share a little bit about yourself for that 1 or 2 people, right, who might not know who you are and what you do.
Sure. My background goes way to 1994 when I first began as a trainer. Prior to that, I was a terrible student. So I investigated accelerated learning, came out tops, never looked back since, continued to become an avid learner of many different areas, particularly neuro-linguistic programming, as you mentioned. And there's quite a number of people who don't really understand the craft, but it is a very powerful tool, at least for myself. It enabled my personal development. Went in to start an 8-figure business that I cashed out of in 2011 with Adam Koo. And then later on, started my own practice in corporate training, which was probably one of the biggest leaps of faith ever, because aside from, dealing with kids and, general public, which tend to be a bit more forgiving, corporates are not so forgiving. So going in there, managed to clinch quite a number of decent deals, working with government in particular, as well as MNCs now. So I kind of like come full circle. So right now I primarily do coaching. COVID has taken a lot of the training budget out from larger organizations that cannot predict their revenue. So I've been mostly dealing with, partly NLP coaching, NLP certifications, right? So there are some people who are being coached by me in the area of public speaking, development of their leadership capabilities, amongst other things, and of course business. But along that journey of me being involved in personal development and personal mastery, it has become very clear what I need to do in order to serve the world a little bit better. So as a psychotherapist, I serve in mental health. As a speaker and a coach and a consultant, I serve the business-to-business space. And in the area of neuro-linguistic programming, I serve anyone who's curious enough to have the tools of personal mastery at their fingertips.
Yeah, wow. And I think love it. I think when we talk about personal mastery, right, it's something that I feel that a lot of people right now could do with, especially in this world where it's a lot more uncertain, a lot more volatile, right? The expectations, competition is getting higher at the same time, right? With a lot of things that's going on right now, right? But just interested to go back a little bit when you first started your journey, right? So was this something that you always envisioned from young, right? When it comes to wanting to be a coach, helping people to master themselves and whatnot, right? When you first started, let's say when you got introduced to NLP, for example, was this something that you already knew you wanted to do, or is it something that was more of a leap of faith and whatnot when you were starting out for yourself?
Yeah, good question for the person who wants to figure out what their path is, right? I mean, anyone who's starting out, they usually will take a look at how other people have done what they've done. And they get inspired towards it, and then they get impacted by it, and then they want to continue that journey. It's a pretty standard cycle. So that's exactly what happened to me at first with accelerated learning, and then later on with NLP. So it was pretty clear that I wanted to stand on stage to speak. I mean, I got my influences. My late dad and my mom were both teachers, and they obviously gave me a little bit of a foundation there. But it didn't dawn on me that actually back then I did want to become a teacher. Thank goodness I didn't. Otherwise, I might have gone crazy or something, because it's just really very stressful. Yeah, it is very stressful. Just being there for 3 to 6 days in a week running enrichment programs back in the past already gave me a little bit of a hint that I was actually in a much safer space than many of the teachers out there. So the long story short, I feel that it wasn't so much that it was like a dream. It was more like an awakening. So it's almost like you're walking through a very dark tunnel, and then suddenly you see, a light turn on, and then it's like, oh, okay, let's go and investigate that, because otherwise everything else is blank. And I suppose everything starts from there. When you turn and face the light, everything else seems illuminated, and that's where you choose your path. And of course, when in contrast, there's nothing else better other than to move towards whatever is already bright and light for you. The good news is that for me, I managed to turn some positive results, and that gave me that oomph, that boost to kind of say, hey, it works for me. I think it'll work for you too. And that's where it started to grow. It didn't help though that I was, it was good to have the head knowledge, but I didn't have the presentation knowledge back then. So it was a bit of a journey to kind of like acquire these skills, to model after other people. And it eventually became pretty clear that I was very inadequate. So the only time you can say that, oh, I don't know how to jump into speaking, you jump into speaking first, then you'll know that you don't know, right?
Yeah.
And then it becomes part and parcel of your day-to-day. It's like, okay, I don't know very much going on forward, taking the next steps. I really have no clue what's going on. And I start from that space every day these days because the world is so uncertain, but it is a necessary part of maturity, in my opinion.
Wow, I think I love it. I think what I hear is the fact that you knew that it wasn't like you knew it's not like you knew exactly where to go, right? You just move forward towards the direction of where you wanted, right? And from there, right, you just started getting better, right? Like for example, like speaking wasn't a big strength, but you just went to overcome it just by doing it over.
It's not even like having a direction. To be fair, I didn't really even know what this was. It just felt good, and following what felt good led to making clarity possible, right? I didn't know that moving forward would do that, but I think one of the most important aspects in any kind of, whether it's a business, whether it's a passion, whatever, you can't just stop and learn, right? So a lot of people are in the rut now because they have always been learning so that they can do. But world is not like that. I mean, if we knew what to do with COVID, we would have learned everything about COVID like 20 years ago. Then we can know what to do now, but we don't. And that's the reality of the VUCA environment. You just have to move forward and figure things out along the way. And that represents a lot of risk. And that represents the difference between people who actually make it and those people who don't.
Oh yeah, I think when you mentioned, right, the fact that it's like you can't learn how to drive just by reading like a 300-page report or going for Facebook Live, right? You actually have to get it done. You actually have to do it, right? And I guess moving on, right? So because some people, right, they kind of have an idea of what makes them feel good, right? About what to do, right? Whether is it coaching, being an entrepreneur, right? Even a side hustle, right? But I guess then the question of the fear comes on, because sometimes they might have commitments, right? They have their fear of being embarrassed, fear of failure, right? I guess from your experience, right, with your years of experience, I'm sure with supporting folks, your coaches and the people around you, right? What are some of the things you might advise, right, or consider, right, when it comes to like, when is it time for me to overcome my fears to finally get started on doing something that I really feel, right, that would help me out in the long term?
Okay, so let's make it a little bit practical. So Mark, what do you fear most in business in general?
Yeah, I think for me, one thing is I think when it comes to like let's say speaking, right, in a one to like a big bunch, right, I still get the jitters every now and then. So yeah, I think that's one of the fears that I still have even right now.
Does that stop you, or does that make you move forward?
By having the fear?
Yeah.
If I give in to the fear, I suppose it doesn't help me at all because I don't get things done. Yeah.
So it is an acknowledgement of what fear is trying to say to you. It is the recognition that there is something that's coming up that is perhaps a worry, right? So fear doesn't appear or manifest itself for no good reason. So surely there's something that fear was supposed to do for you, right? Maybe get you more prepared, maybe suss out the audience a little bit better, build rapport with them a bit. But fear suddenly appearing for no good reason doesn't happen. It really doesn't happen. So it is a manifestation of a part of an individual that is meant to do something. It's like, can you imagine just walking down the street and you're just window shopping, or you're just going to meet a friend for coffee, right? And then all of a sudden there's this huge pain that happens in your right leg. Okay. Then you go like, okay, maybe I should just stop walking. Okay, fine. But then what do you do after that? So you got to go and investigate, right? You got to take a look at your leg and, was it stabbed by some flying debris or is it something internal? Did you twist your ankle or something like that? There must be some kind of a symptom that shows up. But just because the symptom shows up doesn't mean you stop walking. It's like, babies, they fall down all the time, right? So they try standing up and then they are unwieldy and then they fall down. Yeah. It doesn't mean that the baby will kind of go like, oh, damn it, I'm just a failure. I think I'll stop walking for the rest of my life. It doesn't happen that way. So it happens that whenever we are encountering fear, it has a function, but not really the function that we know. The function of fear seems to be a message of a lack of preparation, or message that we have to galvanize other resources and that whatever we have right now is insufficient. But what most people tend to do is they tend to conflate that identity with the behavior. And then what happens is, oh, I am not good enough, or I'm inadequate, or I am not worthwhile. So that mixture, that conflation of the two different levels of thinking is usually what screws most people up. Entrepreneurs, teachers, I know a heck of a lot of teachers, coaches, they start off from the basis of I'm not good enough. And that's why they become such great coaches. Right? Because if I'm not good enough, I'm more empathetic towards your needs, right? Yeah. So when people are journeying on this pathway toward maturity, and I mean maturity from a personality standpoint, right? Your internal development is so strong that now you appreciate people who are different than you. So when a person experiences fear, the first mistake that they make is they stop doing everything. They don't listen to that fear, and they don't think about the outcome that is necessary. So the fear dominates, and as a result, the idea of the vision of the future, that 6-figure, 7-figure, 8-figure target that they have, is just a myth in their minds. Whereas when you think about it and you confer with fear, fear is saying, this is what you need to watch out for, but I'm just a messenger. I'm not the guy who's going to execute your moving towards the other direction. That one, you need to find confidence, you need to find energy, you need to find resilience in order to come and move you in this direction. So I'm just a messenger, right? If you want a bodyguard, find those other guys and they'll be able to move you forward.
Yeah, and I think from what I'm hearing, right, is a lot of, if correct me if I'm wrong, it's more of like going deep down with, whether it's self-awareness, right, and trying to get to the root of it, right, and then to see what happens next, like what do you want to do to sense that then could be more empowering or something that actually drives you forward, right? Yeah, but I guess the question I have, right, is the like what we just shared, right, was I think it's a very good way to delve deep, right, into getting there, right? But what will you say for some folks who talk? I think we talk about entrepreneurs, a lot of coaches, they say that, right, sometimes you just feel the fear and do it anyway, right? Just screw it, just do it, right? What was that? What was your thoughts about that kind of dogma, right? Or what people talk about, right, when it comes to just not thinking about it and just going for it at the same time?
There are pros and cons. So here's the challenge with the current education system. It forces you to think so that you can do. But we know that in the real world doesn't balance out. And I'm quite a fan of balancing things out nicely. So you can't say that you don't think and just do, right? But at the same time, you cannot think for too long. And the problem with this is most people don't even have the forward momentum mechanism. So think about entrepreneurs, coaches, speakers, consultants, whomever who are in the space, in the field. How did they get to where they got to? I mean, look at Jim Rohn, Earl Schoff was his mentor, and he was Anthony Robbins' mentor. What did they preach? What did they talk about? Basically, it's like, have a vision, have a set of goals, plan your goals effectively, move forward, learn from feedback, and just keep moving. Now, that is not necessarily dogmatic, right? It's actually what makes the world go round.
Yeah.
It's the fundamental truth.
Yeah.
But there's a distinction between the people who listen to this truth, who are ready to receive this message, and then those people who are not. I mean, a lot of people will take a look at, like, for some people, they take a look at a dog and then they say, oh, how cute. And then there's a bunch of people who take a look at a dog and are absolutely terrified by it. Yeah. Because they're just simply looking out from different lenses. And that's exactly the same thing. I mean, the idea of the law of attraction is not new. It came like way before Napoleon Hill, way back, when people really knew what it was all about. I mean, the guys who wrote the classics, right? Richest Man in Babylon, Acres of Diamonds, they understood what this concept of the law of attraction is. Although, let's just say that the law of attraction has become a bit more commercialized than actually.
Yeah, very much.
But the fundamental truths are still there. And when people are constantly saying, maybe, let me think about it. So I meet with a lot of people. So there was this group of individuals whom I had met through a series of different discovery calls. So they'll call me and then they'll have this conversation, because my main aim is to figure out what is your outcome. And here's the problem. most people have no way, no substantial, systematic way of identifying what the outcome really is. If you know your outcome, there is no object. You just go. It's very clear. But most people are not even clear. You ask them, so exactly what do you want? And then they go like, you know, and then it becomes an
fuzzy
orchestra of broken tunes coming together and then creating an even bigger mess. And that's the reason why self-awareness first before outer awareness. You go inside, you figure out what you learn about yourself so that you put yourself, if you are a square peg, you find the square peg and you put it there. If you're a triangle, right, or pyramidal shape, and you try and fit it into the square peg, you're going to find yourself being extremely miserable. So there are some people who look at very well-known speakers and then they say, I want to be exactly like so-and-so, like Anthony Robbins, right? So many people have been brought up in that line of logic. But is that you saying it or is it the world saying it? And it's a very fine line to discern. You know, some people aspire towards it and then they realize that that's not what they wanted in the first place. I attribute it to like running a marathon, but crossing the finish line by running in the opposite direction. You realize that you are disqualified by the race. So it's ironic. A lot of the time people will say, no, let me think about it. But as a coach, when I listen to your problems and I know what your outcome is and you're pretty clear what your outcome is, then your fear is nothing more than an obstacle in the path of your outcome. And that's where I become the best salesperson because I know I can help you. I know you're just getting in our own bloody way. And because you're so clear about what your outcome is, it's either passion, you want to scale your business, you want to establish financial stability. There are only certain focal points in any kind of business, right? So some people are just finding their passion. Then there's no point scaling. Just focus on that first. You want to scale, then you need to do something else. You need to gravitate from finding your passion towards looking at systemizing your processes, your thinking, getting your hiring, whatever it is, in order to get in that direction. And unfortunately, the guy who has focused on his attention on passion for the last 5 years, now been habituated in a way of thinking that's never going to get him to scale, unfortunately. So until you rearrange your well-formed outcome, and sometimes if you're clear on a well-formed outcome, it's easy. If you're not clear, then that's where the problem is. This is where you need to get clarity. And you probably don't know the outcome because you just don't have any clarity and you don't have anybody to bounce these ideas off. So that's why coaching has become so prominent, right? It's a blind spot detector. So once you identify the blind spot, suddenly there's illumination. But actually the idea has been in front of you all this while. So the irony is for the people who are thinking too long, they should be acting so that they can think more efficiently. The people who are acting too much, they also have to think more by slowing down, thinking about what they're doing so that they can act more. So it's a balance. It's a very fine balance, and it takes a mature mind, a well-developed personality to be able to discern that and then to be able to call themselves out when they're taking way too much action and need to slow down versus when they are just procrastinating because they're doing intellectual, groveling inside.
Over again. So what I hear is really about, I think number one, you say the balance, right? And that's going to get you in the long term, right? It's not about doing one, like too much of one and too much thinking or too much doing, right? But I guess, so I think moving on, right, which is when you talk about leveling up that level of maturity, right? So I think, of course, one way is also through getting coaching, right? But what do you think are some, perhaps maybe even implementable ways, right, of some of folks that might say, okay, maybe I'm feeling a bit misaligned right now. I'm not so sure what I want, right? Maybe I do have that clarity of as much as I would like, right? What are some things you think that they could do, right? Maybe on a regular daily basis, right? You feel that could really support them, right? Towards getting maybe a bit more clarity, right? A little bit more grounding, a little bit more the perspectives they want to have, they can drive them forward towards the life they want to live.
Yeah, I think there are a few ways to do it. I think all the great speakers of the past have already mentioned this before. So I'm a big fan of modeling, as you probably know. I've modeled marksmen, I've modeled best-selling authors and, championship speakers and the like. Marketers, I've modeled marketers. So of course, all of these things have stood in a good light, especially where my brand is concerned. It's allowed me to get to where I need to go because I was constantly learning and modeling after other people. So here's the challenge with most people. They feel helpless in an area or a domain of expertise that they're not competent in. And this is natural. This is very, very normal. So if you're a new entrepreneur, I'm sorry, you have to live with that for the time being, right? Until you've galvanized enough knowledge as you're going. But the galvanizing of knowledge isn't just about sitting down and listening to podcasts all day long. It really is about learning fragments and implementing them. So the starting point is, do people have an approach where it enables them to experiment? I call it experimentation because you'll never know whether or not it turns out well or not. So the starting point always is, all right, I have this bright idea. Let's experiment with it in the lowest possible cost fashion possible that can reap me the greatest possible gains. So what do? If you're a new coach, go figure out how to find the top 5 people who give you the most honest feedback about your coaching and start that, because 5 hours of coaching is not going to amount to that much risk. It's just 5 hours of your time. But the feedback that you get will be worth 50 hours of your time, right? If you have never sold a product on e-commerce before, then pick one and go. Pick one and go. At least you know the process. At least you figure out that, okay, this one doesn't really work. And then you're going to ask questions. Why did it not work? What was my assumption going into this market space compared with some other market space? For people who are consultants, they probably have got a lot of know-how, but what do they not know? I don't know how to approach the client. Good, great. Now approach one guy and figure it out. What makes that difference by attempting to hack that process, right? That's where the average individual is scared to do, because you thought that the odds are badly stacked against you. And the truth is not. The truth is, it's probably for every $1 you put in, it's going to be $5 back if you're running low risk and well thought through experiments. And when I say well thought through, it basically means I think I know how to get from point A to point B. I've asked a few people about it. They say, yeah, based on common sense, I think it will work. So go ahead and test it out. So that's the first thing that they have to do in order to break through fear and to get started on that journey. All right. Second one, as I mentioned, modeling. We know that people who've been around for a long time have learned as an apprentice in order to master what their mentor has mastered. And they take a lifetime sometimes. The good news is that there's a lot of, how shall I say, there's a lot of material out there right now that enables people to model far faster. You have a lot more YouTube material. You've got a lot of podcasters out there, a lot of influencers, a lot of books. I mean, at your fingertips, you've got Amazon, you've got YouTube. I mean, you can't run away from accepting the fact that the knowledge is already out there, right? The only thing that you can't prove to yourself is that you're competent in using the knowledge. So I tell a lot of people, look, you want to learn neuro-linguistic programming, or you want to learn engineering, coding, whatever. Sure, it's one thing to learn it. It's another thing to practice it and to be able to deliver results. So at the end of the day, it's still about results. I was having a coaching session for a group of high-powered women. They were part of a special group. They were running large organizations, right? Multinational organizations. And they had titles of like general manager, director, that kind of thing. Right? So when they came, they said, can you teach us something about neuro-linguistic programming? I said, fine. And of course, on the day itself, just as what we did earlier on, I started to do a little bit of fact-finding to gear the things that I had to say towards their needs. And, you know, I was thinking, these people don't need business advice, right? So I said, you guys don't need business advice. They said, no, that's not what we're here for. What I want is to be able to communicate with my children and my husband. Then I said, that's interesting. What have you guys tried out so far? Okay, yelling, screaming, arguing. And the truth is that, you know, I found it quite amusing because these people were like 30, 40 years in the business. So obviously, business is not an object for them. So I asked them, how did you get to become so successful in your business? Oh, I had mentors. I read a lot about them. I figured out who to reach and how to collaborate with people by having good conversations, etc., networking and so on. I said, cool. So that's how you got there, right? Anyone never done any one of those things before? And none of them, right? There's a room of them, okay? Then I said, how many of you did the same thing for your relationships? None of them put up their hand, right? So there's no modeling. There's no, I mean, there are plenty of people who got very successful relationships, very successful interactions, communication, and so on. But sometimes that's deemed as second best. You have to aim for like tangible returns first and so on. I don't know. There's some people who got their priorities mixed up, right? That's why they get into a mix, including myself. So one of my challenges with helping people to see what path they ought to go on is that sometimes they honestly aren't ready. You know, the goal, the direction they're going for isn't ready. So I can't even introduce them models. So I have one client right now aiming to become a public speaker, internationally recognized. So I've given him a few pointers, a few hints. The limit for him is that it's not so much the skill set. He's got the skill set. The limit for him is that he doesn't look at himself as a person who could speak. You know, the sense of identity is so limiting that it tends to derail a lot of other behavioral efforts. So when you see yourself as, oh, I am just another guy next door. Okay, cool. What does a guy next door talk about? The weather. Not much. The hawker center food, you know, the latest happenings on the news. That's what the guy next door talks about. But when you dive deep, identity spreads in many directions. You're not just a person next door, you're also a son. You might actually be a father. You might actually be a brother. You might be actually a good friend, a sufferer of certain consequences, and so on. So there's more than just one identity. Why are you not leaning into some of these and then figuring out who you are more than what you think you are? So a bit of a reflection of discussing who you are does help to move you in a direction, because if you constantly play the music of I'm just the average guy, who am I, right? Then the background beliefs are going to get activated that are based on this identity. So always looking at what is an instance. And I'm talking about instances because, let's just put it this way. If you never actually had a coach before, then every instance is just coincidental. But if you've got a coach, you'll find that instance and you try to drag that out. So as a speaker, I was unfortunately self-trained. And by being self-trained, meaning to say that I'll stumble my way through, you know, sometimes I forget my lines, people laugh at me, nearly tripping up going on stage and so on. So by doing that, the good news is that I am a bit more empathetic towards people who find it difficult to speak, because I was there before. But after about 27 years of speaking, being in the training industry, it's no longer an object. I mean, you can call, you know, it's an instant connection, trying to establish what I need to speak on and the content that I need to deliver. So those two things are, and on top of that, the identity piece are certain things which, based on the reflective process, can help you to get somewhere, okay, at least to get started. From a more, shall I say, practical standpoint, the question is, if you don't know, what do you not know? I mean, a lot of people don't ask themselves this question. A lot of them will say, oh, I tried to launch a product online and it failed. I said, no, it's not that you failed. It's that you didn't look at the feedback to adjust it and move forward again. So most people will say, you try to launch an ebook. I mean, I've launched various different ebooks and some of them with varying levels of success. But it doesn't mean I can it. I don't throw it out the window, right? I basically take it, I rewrite it, and then I rewrite it again. Now, if it's a video that's not very comprehensible and people kind of like give some feedback like, oh, I don't know what the hell you're talking about, Stuart, then I'll go back, take a look at why, interview a couple of people, adjust it, and then move forward. It's a feedback cycle. And for most people, they don't believe that that is the secret sauce, but that is the secret sauce. Whether you are highly intelligent or whether you are dumb as a nut, all you need to do is what you know and then expand it by a little bit, and then expand it by a little bit again the next time around, so that the iterations become better, more rhythmic, and more predictable. That's why it is said that business, as it comes up to a certain level, becomes a bit boring. But most people know that boring business is stable business. So flux of business is not very good. So as an individual attempting to take practical steps, what are the steps in the first place? If you don't know, like for example, maybe on your to-do list and has been on the to-do list for the last 2 months. Why? Why is it on the to-do list? Probably because you thought very generically about it. Oh, start building a program on whatever, mental health, let's say, or trading, okay? And then you left it there. But then you forgot that build a program is broken down into 500 steps. Like, okay, do my research. That's one piece. But even doing your research can be broken down on Wednesday, 12 to 2 p.m. Read such and such a book, right? When you break all of these things down, it no longer becomes a mystery. But most people think that by writing something generic, it becomes like a magical thing. Oh, achieve a 6-figure business. Come on, you got to break that down and to make that so tangible that you don't have to think anymore. The reason why a lot of people end up thinking is because actually they don't know what to think about. Then they think in multiple different directions. And what happens is they try and start doing it and it doesn't work because you really are going nowhere, right? So by being very clear, very finite in terms of your workflow and your process, then the system comes to life. Then when you say, okay, I execute system alpha. System alpha works like a charm. It consistently produces these results. But if system alpha doesn't produce these results, then I got to go back and then do alpha prime by adjusting parts of the system so that it can produce the results. I need to figure out why it doesn't work. So that's the basis, the starting point. And the only way to do it is get the necessary information, get the necessary feedback, and treat it as a fact, So a lot of people get butt hurt. It's like, oh, I failed. Oh my God, I'm terrible. I'm worthless. But that does nothing. It is true that you failed, but that's just a fact. The truth is, failure as a fact is better than failure as a personality trait.
Yeah, I love it. I think thanks so much. I think we gave a very comprehensive view of some of the practical steps that folks can take, right, to actually get to where they want to be, right? I think to me, right, it's really about back to a lot of fundamentals that we talk about, right? Your identity, right, modeling, right, breaking down to very implementable, right, bite-sized checks, right, getting feedback. I think one thing I really love is the fact that a lot of people tend to take failure personally, right, or as an extension of themselves, right? But I think it's a very good reminder, right? Even sometimes to myself, because it tends, your brain does to do things that you know logically that shouldn't be the case, right? But about the fact that failure is only something, right? You can choose it to see whether it helps you or something that serves you in the long term. So again, with my next question, right? And I think we probably touched a little bit based on the wonderful things that we have covered, right? Which is I'm just curious, right? Before that, how many in terms of like the people you have spoken to, right, and all books that you have written for, right, the coaches you have had over the years, right, how many people do you think you've reached out to since you started your career so far?
It's a bit hard to say. People I've spoken to, I've done a bit of a calculation during the times when I was running corporate trainings and so on. So the number probably by now exceeds 500,000. So we're looking at now with virtual, I think closer to, I don't know, 700,000, something like that.
And easily scaled.
But the people whom I've really directly worked with, it's definitely much smaller. And even right now, my rolling sequence or number of coaching clients that I have will range from like at any one point of time, 30 to 50. So
those are the folks that you work with.
So I would say the impact that they will experience will be based on what the agreed upon, because I don't have a standardized coaching program, right? They come to me because I've got a lot of expertise and they want me to help them figure out where to go and what are the protocols. Like, I don't have a public speaking like funnel. It's just that people come to me and say, look, you've been 27 years in the industry, surely you can help me to shortcut it. And I say, yeah, sure. And then they come on board. Then some other guy comes up and says, Stuart, this last guy, he's known me for 20 years. He's taken up my NLP practitioner program like 20 years ago. And then he came back to me and said, Stuart, I really need help in my business. Can you help me to use NLP in my business? I said, of course. Okay, then just name your price, We got off on a really good start. But having people to work with means that, in my opinion, I think every individual has their own Achilles heel. Not everybody is able to see what they have been hurt by and what they have been limited by. So actually my job is relatively easy, is to look at people's obstacles and interferences and just remove them.
Of course, sounds easy, right? We do it, but I think with your level of experience and expertise you have done, right? Obviously, you have made it to a point where it becomes like an unconscious competence, right? Which
actually not true. I tell you what happens with most coaches. So for your audience, some of them may be coaches. I can tell you this: if the coaches who are listening to this don't deal with their own stuff, right? If Melvin were here, you say, you've got to deal with your own shit. If if they don't know how to deal with their own shit, they will face a client that is giving them the same shit. It's known as retribution. I mean, karma. I mean, just not knowing what to do with it.
Yeah.
So if you used to be very aggressive, you're gonna one day find an aggressive client. And then you're gonna go like, damn, I was like that before. So the truth is, whatever problems that you're experiencing, you have two choices. Number one is to go inside yourself and figure out how to deal with it so that you know that process is likely to work with people who are your clients in the future. Why? Because all coaches' clients are a form or a version of the past version of you. So you can't help anybody else. You can't help someone who's completely different than you. You can only help someone who's sort of a past version of you because you've resolved that issue before. So the problem with the pretenses on the internet right now, you know, the people who are putting up fake testimonials, you can see it, you can smell it from a mile away. Fake testimonial, fake testimonial, fake testimonial. And the problem here now, when people see all these things for the first time, they get enamored by it, they buy into it, they get disappointed. But more importantly, those people who are trying to put up these landing pages or whatever, they are going to end up with an attitude like, okay, I'm just going to sell this thing because selling is most important. Well, hang on, relating is more important. So in my opinion, I think I wasted a very big chunk of my opportunities because it was such a large number. It's just so hard to reach out to everybody and connect with them. And if I were to turn back time, that would have been my one regret, which is to really make more space to connect with them. Because the attitude of a lot of trainers and coaches in the past was, don't bother with them. They're not paying you for extra time, so why pay attention to them? But I think that doesn't work. And indeed, from my clientele list, many of my clients, I would say 70% of my clients, have known me easily 6 years and above, right? So they come back to me after they've already purchased lots of stuff. So they come back to me. And why? Because they are assured that they are going to get what they want, right, in a program. And they also need someone who's a bit flexible in terms of accountability. There are some people whom I'm pretty harsh with, and there's some people whom I'm very benevolent to, if there's a better word to use. Where I have to gauge their circumstances. Sometimes being tough with someone who's a rock doesn't really help. Sometimes you need to use a different approach. But the idea is that with this large number of people, especially for those who are starting out, the 500,000-600,000 people did not happen overnight. It happened through a conscientious, systematic, and scalable process, which basically means that if you need to, then you do a webinar every night. Right? Even if it's for 5 people, then 5 times 365, you do the math, you eventually get there. It's no-brainer. But then you have to ask yourself what value you're putting out in the world. So I would say that the numbers are less relevant compared to the value and the output of the value. So if you take a look at somebody like Nick Vujicic, for example, by the time he started his career, he had already spoken to more than 1 million people. So it was like, it's like a mindset breaker. To me, it's like, wow, this guy can do it, and he's half my size, literally, right? So I got to figure out a better way, a better system. So all of us are figuring it out somewhere along the way. And I think that the impact is about really starting that conversation. A lot of people say, reach out, generate leads, build traffic, etc. I can't see it like that. You see, to me, it's just build a conversation. If you build a conversation, then at least you're treating people as a human being. If you want to scale and all that, of course, the numbers and all that come into the picture. But you need to have conversion only takes place conversation at a time.
Wow, I think that's a very grounding perspective, right? Especially when I think a lot of people, they are being trained or conditioned, right, just to chase after numbers, right? And I think I love what you said, that which is to relate, right, way more than to sell, right? And I think that's a wonderful perspective shift, especially right now. I think that one-to-one conversation is so important, especially the fact that it's kind of lacking, right, of sorts in today's world, right? I think that's a great perspective, especially for people who are starting out in the space as well. And I guess, right, so with that, right, thanks. I think it's a very good shift about, as you reframe about talking about numbers, right? But I guess with your years of experience, right, with coaching, with training, with speaking, right? So what do you think, right, in your own personal observations, right, some of the biggest reasons, right, or even the traits, right, of folks who actually achieve, let's say, way bigger, better, right, even faster success, right, in sustainable manner, right, as compared to those you feel that might still be a little bit stuck, right, or not as fast as they would like to be? What do you think are some of the biggest observations of the traits and characteristics involved, right, for these two groups of folks?
I think it's very hard to pinpoint, because when let's just focus on, like, I do deal with career professionals and executive leaders as well in organizations, right? It still is quite variable. So I'll give you a few examples of what kinds of obstacles some people face. One of it is the obstacle of myopia. So they thought that they were doing really well, and they thought that they're like, there's this tutor I'm working with, quite a brilliant guy, hundreds of students, no system. And I'm going like, how do you track all of this? And he's going like, I write it down. And I'm going like, dude, you're writing it down. And you got a couple of hundred students, right? That's crazy. Then that tells me you should be having 1,000 students by now if you had a proper implemented system, but you're just wasting there are a lot of holes in your entire business. And why does he not do that? Because he has a limiting identity, right? He never thought that anyone would treat him seriously. So he just treated it as a hobby. And man, can you imagine being able to keep track of fees, tuition fees, what time, what syllabus to cover and all that for 200 plus people? Oh, wow. This guy is somewhat of a genius. That means he's already got a computer inside his head. I couldn't do that, right? So that's one case of a limiting identity. I have another person who's constantly distracted. So this form of a limitation is more like you are running a business because you want to pursue your passion, and then you let your passion run your business. Okay, so in other words, you get all these harebrained ideas going left, right, center, and then you are starting to do like 30 or 40 different things all at the same time, but you didn't have a system to test them or prioritize them. Okay, so the sin of thinking too far ahead, thinking too much, it's a sin only because you're overpowering your strength. It's like if Superman was Superman 100% of the time, you can't shake his hand, you can't stare into his eyes, you die, right? So a strength overplayed is not good, and people need to recognize that. And most of the misery, by the way, in the world is caused by strengths that are being overplayed. Okay. Then another one would be, okay, so a lot of people think of procrastination as a deal breaker, but procrastination is the symptom. The root cause are multiple. You have many other things. Like I give you one more example. There's this gentleman whom I worked with. It started off as a counseling case, and then it elevated him to a point where it was like, wow, I need you as my business coach. Yeah. So the counseling case came in. He was finding that he wanted to find information for his son, and his son was really not doing well in school. But it turns out that the father, he himself, was part of the reason why the son was not doing well in school. So I said, if you change yourself, the situation will change. He didn't believe me. I said, just try it out now, 7 days. Then if it works to a certain extent, extend it by another 7 days. If it really doesn't work, then after 7 days, come back, let's figure out what the obstacles are. So it turns out that when he changed his demeanor, his son began to change his demeanor as well. And it almost miraculously changed. And this is what we call the it's also partly myopia. You didn't realize that you were actually part of the problem. And if you remove yourself as part of the problem, then you become part of the solution. Others would be lack of skill. Literally, you tell a person, okay, I want you to create an e-learning course. Okay, so a lot of people go e-learning course. Where do I start? What camera do I use? What microphone do I use? Where do I stand? Do I use green screen? Do I use blue screen? What kind of lighting is there? Even if they could ask that question, those set of questions, they are already far closer compared with the rest. Unfortunately, it becomes a competency issue. Okay, so that's another level. Another one is not recognizing their strengths because they are paying attention to the problems. Example, there's a guy who's working with me because he claims that he has an anxiety problem. Anxiety. But what I noticed was the anxiety never occurred in places where he was very confident in himself, right? Like, interacting with high-level officials, it was okay. proving his own competence in his subject area, no problem. But whenever it was dealing with some aspects of some element within his work, I'm trying not to reveal too much about this guy, trying to do those kinds of things, he suddenly will fall into this absolute trap of anxiety. Why? It's not because of anxiety. Anxiety is the symptom. Remember, fear is the messenger. Anxiety was the messenger. It was just saying, you feel inadequate around such people, right? And when I realized this, it was also because there was a running pattern of wanting to prove oneself, wanting to demonstrate competency and a sense of being good at what you do. You want to portray yourself as being positively grounded, right? So no wonder the sense of perfectionism creeps in, and then whenever he's within this group of people, he'll always have an anxious breakdown to a point where, for a large part of his life, he was with IMH popping pills, which is unfortunately, it's like you got a headache, and you just go like, I got a headache, I'll just take Panadol. But you don't realize that actually there's a nail in your skull. Remove the nail, then you don't have to have any more Panadol, you know what I'm saying? So sometimes they are a multitude, and I will only know this when people start to take action. So the trouble with most coaching, I think, is when people say you got to take massive action. I disagree with that statement, because taking massive action sounds like you got to have a very big moving, motivation to, get to where you need to go. I prefer to look at it as taking action massively, which may sound like semantics, but in that sense. So rather than taking one massive action, take action, a lot of action in a massive quantity. So rather than one big thing, take a series of very small steps, tiny steps if necessary. Change one thing, reduce the time that you use to set up that website by 10 minutes. Last time you did it in 1 hour, now do it in 50 minutes. That kind of thing is like running. What struck me the most when I started to reflect on all of these is that the sequence of improvement is not a linear improvement. So the linear improvement model suggests that the more you do, you get an equivalent return, or that it is very flat. So you need to put in a lot of hard work in order to get minimal returns, right? Actually, that's not true. It's actually an exponential scale. Why? Think about a marathon runner. If you start, do you run marathons, Marc?
Used to, like this is half marathon.
Okay, half marathon. So you'll take how long? 3 hours, 2 hours?
Yeah, two and a half.
2.5 hours, right?
Yeah.
So if you did get a marathon coach, probably you could shave off like a decent 30 minutes. Right? And then you'll be enamored. But the guys at the world-class level are not looking for 30 minutes to be shaved off. They just need 10 minutes or 1 minute even to break the world record. So what it tells me is that it gets more difficult the further on you go, but it has to be done because that's your strength, right? That's your talent. That's the thing that you've invested a lot of time in. So you need to continue to invest a lot of time in it so that you continue to be at the top of your game. So most people who are limited, sometimes they're about to go to that exponential growth pattern, and then they give up here. It's very irritating. It's so frustrating. It's like the guy who says, you know how it is. I mean, I'm sure you've been on sales calls and some of these guys tell you what their problem is. You know you can solve it, but then they talk themselves out of it. No, let me think about it later. Then figure it out. But that's where the ability for an individual to really move forward, and this is demonstrated in body. Like, for example, are you aware that if you trained your body to respond by, let's say you wanted to aim for a goal, and if you trained your body to just jog slowly, that means in the morning your workout routine is jogging slowly, resting for 5 minutes, then jog some more. You know what kind of habit you'll build up? You'll build your habit as a fractal, a pattern of how you're achieving your business goals.
Oh, so it kind of like extends, right, to other areas.
Because the body has an effect on the mind, right? So when people are striving for something, they'll find some other part of their life which is strong, where they're strong in. Like maybe they're very aggressive you'll notice there's some people who are very successful, they're very aggressive, right? Because that's a persona that they're tapping into that allows them to do the forward momentum, right? Keep moving forward. But take a look at a lot of coaches. What are they? Quite docile now, right? Because they're kind people, they're compassionate people, so they're a bit more docile. But it doesn't mean that you have to be aggressive. All you need to do is find something in your physiology so that you train your body and mind to move forward and make it deliberate as an effort, so that after that workout, you come back to your desk and then you go like, okay, what's the next thing I have to complete? And it's stuck inside your mind, you see. So the body and mind function as one. A lot of people, unfortunately, when they encounter these kinds of, Marc, I know you can help me, but so it's instead of moving forward, they're moving backwards. And this kind of constant moving backwards is also going to be a fractal pattern in achieving anything. I know I need to read this book today, but I'm tired, and they'll come up with all of these things. So when you take a look at people who are able to continue to invest their time and to recognize that at some point of time it will click, and then this is where the exponential rise will take place. It's a question of patience, in my opinion. Not everybody is born to be a salesperson, but if you keep at it long enough, you will end up realizing that you are and have always been a salesperson. The irony is like, if you don't believe you're a salesperson, you just sold that idea to yourself.
Wow. I think there's like so much to take in, right? I think based on your vast experience, right? Whether is it about the identity, right? About lack of skill, competency, right? Or even just about that being, I think the state, right? I think what I just mentioned the last part, I think there's something I can use even for myself, that sometimes that I might want to get myself in the state, whether it's to exercise and whatnot, right? To get into the more, like you say, aggressive kind of
sprints, do HIIT, right? And then just push yourself. It's like you're at the limit, you say, no, I got to do 2 more, and then you push, right? That is something that a lot of us, I mean, if you know that there are obstacles that limit you, you put it in your body functions as a reminder. I think it's been very useful for me, especially since it's only like 4 years since I really seriously started working out, right? So
I know you track your workouts and all on Facebook. I think it's so inspiring. I track it all the time for that side as well.
I haven't been posting because I read a post that said something like, if people post their workout routines, they must be narcissistic or some shit like that.
Well, I mean, on some level it helps, right? At the same time, so no, I enjoy it when you do it. So I guess in interest of time, right? I would like to say, right? I did actually want to ask a lot more questions, but I think you went very deep and wide, right? So hopefully there will be a second round. Because I think the next part I wanted to discuss was more about I think right now people do say that mental wellness, right? Mental health is something we really look at, right? That's something I would have loved to interview maybe on a round 2, if that's okay, right? But I think for this the past one, I think that I've gained so much insights that I know I can use for myself, right? And even for entrepreneurs, like hustlers, right, could really take in, right, to apply moving forward. But I guess with that, right, Stuart, any final words, right, to close off perhaps part 1 of this interview, right? And maybe a little bit of how they can find you and whatnot as well.
Sure. I'm actually quite easily found. You can head down to Facebook, Instagram, even Twitter. I'm still findable there. The easiest way is for them to drop me a note at, especially for people who are interested to have a conversation, an initial conversation with me to find out where their current circumstances are. Go to link.ws/Stuart, Stuart. Okay. So link.ws/Stuart. And then, you just fill in some simple questions so that I can get a basic understanding of you and the value you place on the solution. Then we'll have a conversation. And most of my conversations now with COVID and all that, I'm not going to step out now. So we're going to do it on Zoom again. That's the first point. So in closing, in my opinion, I think we're looking at a new world of coaching, of business building, because people are aware that their energy and their passions do matter. And if you're not, since you brought up mental health and so on, I am a counselor and a psychotherapist. So I find that a lot of entrepreneurs don't always have a good self-care routine, right? They don't necessarily know what energizes them. So they sometimes, when they lapse, they really go down the hill, they eat whatever junk food and stuff like that. So it's not really their fault. Right? What really it means is that they've forgotten what drives their energy. And if you are running a business or trying to start off running a business, your energy has got to be an all-time high. So you have to be a very big protector of the energies that go on in terms of what from the outside world goes inside of you. That includes food, that includes news, that includes information from people. So if you're constantly receiving a lot of negative information, it's very easy, block, no? Right? Block, unfriend, switch the channel. And then more importantly is the internal stuff that you say to yourself, because a lot of that festers if you allow it to. So I'm not talking about affirmations. I'm talking about coming to the truth. What exactly is the truth? Why? Why is that the truth? I mean, if you suck at business building or you suck at sales, okay, admit it is the fact. But so from you have a starting point, and it doesn't serve to become a thorn in your side anymore. Instead, it is just something, a challenge to be dealt with. And as an individual begins to progress, they may come to realize that just like COVID brings out problems that were already suppressed at home, in working styles, in studying styles, in the economy. So all the fracture points got taken out, right? Because you have the circuit breaker and then business goes awry, you can't survive, and then you have to close down. Likewise, the journey of entrepreneurship is almost like that. It will surface your limitations and your weaknesses. So you start hearing yourself whining, complaining, blaming, making excuses and all that. It's a natural part of entrepreneurship. So do I complain? Do I blame, make excuses and all that? Of course, but I limit it now. I schedule it in 5 minutes. So, on a daily basis, I can allow myself to what the hell? And then, jump back. There must be a bouncing back from that. So the amount of time that you spend on certain things can help you to rejuvenate your energies. But what is your go-to, and how much more can you do that? And if that's not available, let's say exercise is your go-to, then if it's raining torrentially, what else can you do? Could you find something that's mentally stimulating? Can you find something that's emotionally expressive, like write poetry or write songs or whatever, right? So you need to have some of these go-to re-energizers, because just as I can't remember the name of the authors. I think one of they wrote this book called The Power of Full Engagement. I think it's Jim Lower and someone else. So they actually run a consultancy business around the world, just teaching executives how to enhance their energy. And I think for entrepreneurs also, they need to, because you have 5 minutes of time. If you are at, maybe not 5 minutes, let's say an hour. You've got 1 hour of time, you've got high energy, you get a lot more things done than a guy who's got 1 hour but no energy.
Yeah, absolutely.
In fact, if you have 5 minutes of time, you might actually still be able to do what the deflated guy does in 1 hour.
Yeah.
So it really is about the internal mechanisms that are operating so that we can be at our best. So you can't even tell whether or not I've had 3 hours of sleep or 7 hours of sleep. It shouldn't be distinguishable. All it takes is for me to know that as I'm doing whatever I'm doing, I have faith in what I'm doing. I acknowledge that whatever it is that I'm doing is helping the world, is adding value, and I'm constantly hacking the value add. Right? So a lot of people say hack the system and all that. If that's the priority, it's still mechanical. I would say hack the value add. If you are taking a $15,000 course from a coaching program with me, then I need to figure out how to return you $500,000 worth of value, right? So maybe initially break even, you're happy. But if I went double, you'll be happier, isn't it? Yeah. And then if I can find a way for you to be able to produce results because of my attitude, right, of constantly wanting to add that value, then sometimes, the people who are afraid of it, it's like, oh no, he's doing it again. But then there's some people who are like, hey, he really looks out for us. So I prefer to be viewed as the latter, not the former, of course. But in so doing, I need to drive my energies. And I hope that if there's any message, the energy that you carry is the brand that you carry. So it has got to be in tandem with whatever it is that you're saying, how you're saying it and all that, so that you are becoming more and more masterful every day at taking care of yourself, not being selfish, but just as, the aeroplane thing, you put on the mask first, then you help other people, right? Yeah. So you've got to do parts of that as well. So what are your go-tos? What are you aware of? What do you avoid? Like I used to avoid running. right? But now I realize it's actually a very good way of balancing up some of the ways by which I do things. So I do it once in a while, with the intention of eventually, finishing a marathon distance, not because of anything else, but because I'm terrified of it. So constantly stretch, constantly review your day, review how you've been stretching and the decisions you've been making, so that your energy is in tandem. You come back to a space where I've done my best. I'm going to continue to outdo myself tomorrow. I'm going to return value to other people, and chances are you have peak energy anytime, anywhere you go.
Wow, I love it, man. I think this is also and to me, right, something I'm grateful for, right, because this is something that I got from quite a while back, and this is one of the core parts we talk about during our 2 days program about energy, right, sustaining it for the long term, right, because from what I always say, right, all the planning, motivation, right, all the goals you can put in the world, right, will not be possible if you don't even have the energy to sustain it, right. So I think I still love that message. Something we're gonna go on sharing more and more, especially today's world as well. Yeah. So with that, so I think thank you so much for your time today. Right, I'd love to have a second round of you, right, to discuss a bit more like the matters of like mental wellness, health, as mentioned. But I think we got so much value today, even for me to digest and to apply it for my lives, right? So yeah, with that, thank you so much, Stuart. I look forward to speaking with you again, right? And thanks so much for those who are watching in as well.